Hello, everybody. I'm going solo. Dermot has taken a very well-earned break, and he deserves it. He's been going day and night for the past few months, and it's just too much now to ask him to do the videos. He may come in from time to time. It's entirely up to him, but I do appreciate Dermot, and I appreciate him for all the other videos as well. For how many did we do? 22, is it? 21 or 22? And still have to do a day job. So it was a big ask. So he's stepping back for a while, and I will run solo until whenever. I'll leave it up to him. But I hope to get more videos out on a quicker timescale now, since I am going to be doing this solo. And also the reason I want to do more videos in a shorter period, and hopefully they are shorter. I don't know how they're going to go, but that is my intention. I have noticed, even on the last video, as long as it was, I still wasn't able to give me all the information that I had. And that is the same with every video. I'm left with a chunk of information that I haven't spoken about. So I'm trying to rectify all that and get some additional information out without leaving anything behind and not making the videos too long. So that's my intention. But whether or not they'll work out like that remains to be seen. So without further ado, I just wanted to catch up on a few things. Now, I have noticed lately that these 5D things are starting to rear their ugly heads again. And it's coming from surprising sources. I don't know where this notion of 5D is after coming from. We're going into 5D. No, you're not. I think I know actually where it did come from. And it's years ago when the internet was new and all these videos were new. And somehow or other, this notion of 5D crept in. Fifth density. So I've always known. I don't know when I didn't know, but I've always known it was only fourth density, or 4D if you want, fourth density. Fourth density is your heart center, your chakra. So what these people are talking about is that you'll go from your third, you will skip your heart center, one of the most important centers, and you're going up into the throat chakra. No, you're not. The heart, you have to go through the heart of everything. You cannot bypass it. Now, you can focus, well, I'm going into 50, all ego. If you're going into 50 here, that blow it, I'll go into 60. No, I don't blow 60, I'll go in 70. All ego. Focus on getting out of 3D. And if you wind up in 5D, or fifth density, whoa, that would be a surprise. But focus on getting out of 3D. That should be your intention. Not to skip the heart chakra. One of the most important. That's what we're moving into. That's what this planet is moving into, fourth dimension. That is your heart center. Now, those of you who know, I am a big follower of the Law of One. And nowhere in the book does it mention or going into 5D, the fifth dimension, or fifth density. No, it's always fourth density, never fifth. And that is something that always stuck with me, that they hadn't even said it. I know we're not going into 5D. So people, focus on your 4D, focus on your 3D, just get the hell out of here. In the law, one is it states that, just let me make sure I have the right wording, that a lot of people, oh yeah, there it is, and this is a quote: the greater majority of people will repeat 3D. That's the quote. Will repeat 3D. And some of these, I don't want to be impolite, but they're talking about 5D. Come on, folks. Oh yes, and some of the same people, by the way, are talking, oh, there's going to be no solar flash. You are the solar flash. There's a word I could use for that, and it starts with a B. I won't conclude it, but you can judge for yourself. Now, the solar flash will happen. Take a look around you. Take a look at the weather. The weather has gone crazy. Oh, it's global warming. To everybody, the humans are the fault. Bullshit. Humans are not the fault. The planet, like all the other planets, is heating up. It's natural. It does that every so often. It's prepared. It's preparing itself. And the cycle, the freeze, the ice age is going to happen. Solar flash will happen first. Okay? Solar flash will happen first. It has to happen. Now, I'm not the one who's saying this. I am. But now the people, the scientific community, are also saying it. Hello? But you're not talking way down the road now. You're talking imminent. It's imminent. Right here. Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers, one of these most respected people that most people follow, studies the sun, the climate, and the earth changes. He's highly, highly respected. He is coming out now blatantly saying, yes, it's coming and it's imminent. And what he's saying is, we're heading into a new ice age. And he says further, when that starts to happen, people will move underground. Now, isn't that strange? Like they did before, he says. Okay, this is from a scientific point of view. And he actually shows underground caverns and bunkers or tunnels. And he said a number of tunnels, and I can't remember how much he said, but he'll be showing pictures of them. But he says, and these are only the ones that we know about. But he says, this is where people are eventually going to go again. In my other videos, I said that there are creatures, not creatures, that's the wrong word, beings who are underground and all have always been underground, and they are in 4D. So that was the reason it actually went underground. It was mainly from the time of Atlantis. And they knew what was coming. They moved underground and have been there ever since, but are waiting to come back out to show us, to tell us, to show us stuff, new technology. The scientific community is now agreeing with the soul, but he's watching the sun like a hawk. He is expecting the sun to throw out an enormous solar flare. He's waiting and he's watching it, and he's saying it's imminent. Telling people all the time, always be prepared, because it is going to happen. And people, when it does happen, people will have to move back underground. But how many will move underground? How many will be left to move underground? Just like the time of Atlantis. Who was left to move underground? Survivors who knew that the solar flash, not the ice age, was coming. And it started at the poles and started moving towards the equator. And people who were trying to escape it moved up towards the equator and eventually had to move underground. And they've stayed, but kept their vibrations up. Kept their vibrations up at a 4D level, 4 density level. That's made them very, very hard to see unless they choose to be seen. So I hope I've nailed that one. The solar flash will happen. By the way, 2 or 3 videos back, I said solar event will happen and it will be triggered by something coming from behind the sun. It will activate the sun. It's a fail-safe if you want it. Nothing can stop that. It's coming and it will activate the sun. And the sun is not in the least, when people least expect it, this will go boom. There goes the technology, folks. There goes your mobile phones. There goes computers, your fridges, you name it. Everything's going to be shut down. Now, think of it this way. Bill Gates is buying up a whole lot of land in America. He's the biggest landowner in the US, and he has an enormous acreage in the middle of the US. And people are saying, oh, you're going after the GMOs, you're bringing out all the food. And others, that's the real reason. They're also buying up the land in the middle of Australia. Why? Why are all the billionaires and the Soros and all that, why are they buying up huge tracts of land in the middle of all these continents? Because they know that is going to be the safest place to be when the water levels rise. And nothing to do with food. It has something to do with food. Their food, and they'll control the land, and they say who comes in and who does not come in. So think on that one. Why are they buying up so much land in the middle? And they'll all join up all the land. There might be parcels at the minute. Before very long, they'll have just one complete huge patch, a huge chunk of the US and a huge chunk of Australia. They may be doing it in other places as well. I don't know about that. I think Soros is the one that's actually buying up all the land in Australia, because that is going to be the safest place when the waters rise. That and very high altitudes, the mountains. Okay. So I hope I've nailed that one for you. And yeah. Right. So I'm going to pause it here and take a breath. Let me pause this. Right. Right. Now I want to hop back to the Transylvania books and the I was mentioning about the beginning of mankind. Now these are books. Transylvania series of books was written by a guy called Radu Cinema. Now he is Romanian, belonging to a secret security organization, the mighty Romanian government, and he heads it, but he's actually a white hat. Very, very much in the know. And he was introduced to the people from the underground. And as soon as he was able to adjust his vibration to suit their vibration, they were able to take him and show him technology. Some of this technology were viewing screens. This was all 4D. And he was looking at holographic projections of the beginning of mankind in the minutest detail. And he wasn't controlled, he was controlling it. He could go anywhere he wanted to go. He could look at anything that he wanted to look at, investigate, because he wanted to make sure that what he was looking at was actually true and real. So he was able to go back. He was able to control this with his mind. These were holographic projections, and he was looking at these. And he went right back to the beginning of mankind. And he, I have it here, so excuse me. Right. What it is the chronology of the first steps of transformation of DNA. Now, as I said, the first moment when the cosmic influence for triggering the plan to create the human being was implemented around 432,000 years BC. Now, the influence or the build-up of the contact with the primates that were going on and the insertion of the consciousness and the alterations that they were doing to the DNA of the primates, that didn't happen overnight. We had to create Adam. It took approximately 10,000 years. Now, the Syrians, who were, according to the books, responsible for all of this, they work with stars. They know each individual star that's in the sky. They know that every single star is connected. And they know the configurations of the stars and the energy emanating from the stars. Okay? So they were able to get the alignment that they wanted with particular stars to focus on transmitting consciousness into the primates that were here at the time. Now, the idea this was first rooted 60,000 years previous, nearly 500,000 years ago, excuse me. But it was first, the idea was first suggested or put forward by celestial beings. It was there, the initial thought was there 60,000 years previous. And it was implemented by the Syrians. But the Syrians, who were extremely spiritual, were influenced in the creating of the human DNA as the superior being. The whole idea was to make a superior being as requested by the Creator. Okay? So it was at the behest of the Creator, the celestial beings implemented that and put things in order so that would happen. In other words, the plan was there. And I also believe, although they don't say this in the books, that the primates that were there at the time were kind of working models. Here are the models. Now implement the plan. Whatever you decide to do with the models, not the primates in this case, go ahead and do it. They were not told what to make or who to make. They were given the working model, i.e. the primates who were moving around on the planet at the time, who were even much further back than what we call the Neanderthal man. So that was how the plan was implemented. It was suggested at the time, the thought was put out there by celestial beings. Now, when we speak of celestial beings, who we are referring to? Usually the angelics. The angelics, and that's something I need to come to. But the angelics who implemented this, put the thought into the consciousness of Syrians 60,000 years prior, which would have made it, nearly 500,000 years ago. So it's a long time in Earth history. A flick of the eye in universal time. So when the Syrians, so how it began is that there was a big, vicious war going on in space at the time. A really, really vicious war. There was destruction all over the place. Now, Syrians were involved in that. They don't say who, the books don't say who the fight was between, but they did kind of acknowledge it was Orions. So, from the Orion Nebula. Which, by the way, they were from originally themselves. They were from Orion. So, as the war progressed, it wasn't even close to the Earth at the time. It was in another part of the universe. One of the Syrian ships, it was a murder ship. I mean, you're talking about a planet-sized ship. Okay, it was damaged in the fighting. And the ship was instructed to depart and effect repairs. So the ship left. Now this ship is so big, its holes are so big that it has other huge ships in this loading bay. Because ships of all sizes. This is a planet-sized ship. So it went, it knew about Earth. And what was the planet at the time was kind of a sister planet, if you want, to the Syrians. They knew of its existence. They treated it and respected it as one of theirs. So that is where the mothership went, left the scene of the fight, and came and headed in the direction of Earth. Now, it did not come in too close, it stayed off, because the ship was so big, it would affect the orbit of the planet. But what it did do, it sent down other ships, big ships, onto the planet. to extract the uh, materials, especially gold. Now, the ship needed gold in order to carry out repairs because of a lot of the structure of the ship was made in gold, and gold is a very high vibrational material. And it's, I think, I forget the name of it actually, that's on it as a plutonic or something like that, that's containing gold. So they needed gold to carry out repairs. Now, they knew that the primates were on the Earth, so it stayed off, orbiting another, I think it was Saturn, was it? But then they sent down other ships. Now, one of these ships was a huge transport ship, a supply ship, pretty big. And that was commanded by a guy by the name of Tenoku. Hope I got that name right. So he landed on the Earth for all his crew, and they were unloading stuff, getting things set up for drilling into the Earth. But they did have special means for extracting the gold. There was no open mines or anything like that. They were able to insert rods and tubes into the ground, sensed whatever frequency down, liquefied the gold, and was able to draw the gold back up. So we're not talking about mines here. So let me see if I can, yeah. When the commander came down, and they would been walking for a while, he noticed these primates watching them. Okay. So the primates were actually in fear of Sirians. And so they kind of always stayed off at a bit of a distance, watching what the Sirians were doing. Now, as they became more used to the Sirians being there, the leader, one of them was a bit more braver than the others, and he was inclined to step forward a bit more. So one day, Tenoku decided, no, I'm going to go and see if I can start communicating with the primates. So he started making gestures towards what he took to be the bravest of them to come and have a look. So eventually the primate became braver and started to approach. And that's how the contact was made. Now, Tenoku, had the idea that if he could somehow train the primates to help them to do the work, it would make things a lot easier. If you want to look at it, you could call it the time of Tenoku, or when the idea of creating the human race was created. It wasn't to make slaves, it was to help the Sirians already doing the work, because the atmosphere on Earth at the time was not conducive to the Sirians. They couldn't stay too long on the planet because the density, the atmosphere was not right for them. But the primates, they were born into it. So they were quite used to it, they could walk away. So he was thinking, Tenoku was thinking, if I could get the primates to help the Sirians, so much the better. Now he didn't want he didn't have the idea of using the primates, but he knew, because he's been a high spiritual being himself, that by having the primates close to them, the primates' consciousness would start to be raised. The knowingness would emanate from the Syrians over to the primates. That's how it all started. Because the primates were now in close proximity to the Syrians, who were spiritual beings, and their spiritual, the vibration of the Syrians was now affecting the primates. So he was being urged, but he wasn't, even as spiritual advanced and all as he wasn't aware that all of this was all predestined. He was actually predestined to be there, and all going back 60,000 years previous to the time that he set foot on the planet. So in effect, all human being is more or less thankful to him, because it's his DNA that he implanted into the primates, not surgically or anything like that, but he done it through technology. And after he got clearance from the higher command to do this. Now, it's when these other Syrians became involved in performing this. When it was Tenaku, from whatever technical device he had, he would put himself into this vehicle on the ground, and he would send out these signals from him, from his own mind, into the primates. There was no forcing going on here. He advanced the primates. He brought them up to speed. Well, not up to speed, the Syrians, but they became more advanced, more knowledgeable. Because if they had been left on their own, okay, where would we be? They were not the rate of advancement of the primates at the time was very, very, very slow. I suppose we might be at the Neanderthal age at this stage. We'd be so far back. I suppose over a couple of million years, I suppose we would get to some consciousness level. But Tenaku knew that if by having the primates help them, the Syrians were helping the primates. It was like for like. But this had all been planned out 60,000 years before on a celestial level, on a much higher, from a much higher source. Usually when you say the celestial level, you think of angelics. No, angelics, can I just deviate for a minute? Angelics are the next creation after the Holy Spirit, or the Mind Spirit. They were next created. Okay. So this notion that angels are falling is another cosmos. This is what is meant by when the Syrians came down and all of the crew started to join in and come down. That's been twisted around. And now it's the Anunnaki came down and made slaves of the people. To see how it was twisted. Now just suddenly it's Anunnaki. No mention of Syrians. I told you who the Syrians actually were in my, I put out a post on it, explaining who the Anunnaki are Syrian. But now there are so many small variations of Anunnaki that it's hard to know who's who now. They've advanced so much themselves and they're split off from the original. The Syrians that were there at the time are now different to the Syrians that are actually there now. Syrians are on Sirius A now, are so advanced even from them that they've developed and changed as well. So evolution is continuous. You have to evolve. You cannot stay still. This notion that you can, you know, stay on the earth. You don't have to go through the ascension. You must go through the ascension, but you don't go nowhere. It's natural law, it's divine law. Evolve or dissolve. It's time for humanity now to evolve. So how do you evolve? It's up to you. So, and I hope that's kind of covered things now of who Tanaku actually was. He put his basic DNA into primates. And it's from there that everything sprung. This is where we get the name Enki and Enlil from. There's letters taken mainly from his name or from all the things that they've used. The EN and the EL. There's nothing about brother fighting brother and one brother killing the other brother and all that. No, none of that went down. It's been made to look like it went down to suit a narrative. Hey, folks. Now, you could say, well, it's only a book. Okay, it was a book written by a guy who was actually there looking at this. Now, he was astounded. And he was able to look at every single person that he wanted to look at from the Syrians. He could pick out anybody, look and see who he was, look into his DNA, and look into his relatives, no matter where they were, and have a look and see what they were about. And they could go into their relatives. The programming allowed him to do anything he wanted to visit, to look at. As long as he thought about it, it came. There was no restrictions. It was all there, and he realized, and he was dumbstruck that he was looking at the formation of mankind. Now, that makes a lot more sense to me than the stories we've been told up to now. I went into the story of Adam. This is the last video, the video before that. They created Adam, who was androgynous. Now, the primates at the time could what am I calling it? Birth. The females could give birth. The Syrians then were not able to do that. Even with the technology, they could not do that, get one primate, one human that had now been developed to mate with another human to produce a third human. They were not, they had to do that using technology and insemination. And birth was delivered in the theatre. Well, it was delivered again through technology. There was nothing what we call natural involved. That took a long time to get. It took 10,000 years before they eventually got it, where the beings, the human beings, could now mate with each other and produce an offspring. It took 10,000 years to develop that side of it. But they got there. This is why Adam, being the first one, was androgynous, because they weren't able, didn't have the technology or know-how at the time to have them reproduce. But the primates on the planet did. So when the primates started to advance consciously and become more aware to such an extent that as time went on, they were helping the Syrians. They could go on Syrian ships, perform what the Syrians did. And just being around, and also know because their vibrations were being raised. Their knowledge and consciousness was being raised. So there was nothing forcible here. It was exchange like for like. And if you want, and that was called, by the way, the fall of the angels at the time, when the Syrians that came down to help, and that had been approved by the Syrian High Council back on the planet, the Sirius. What we might call the wise men on the planet at the time, or the very wise people, knew when word got back of what Tanaku was trying to do, and they realized, this is what had been foretold. So they immediately sent instructions to the ship that the ship was to remain there. That it was now that what they were doing on Earth, creating new primate, a superior being, was now taking priority over any war, over any fighting, and the ship was to remain there and focus entirely on that. Now, the ship, if you like to call it, its name was, we pronounce it Nibiru, or Nibiru. But they had a slightly different spelling on that, but it still sounded the same. The way they spelled it was Neiberu. We spell it slightly different. But that is the ship that everybody is dreading coming back. But that's the ship that created us, that created the human being. And still out there. Okay. Still out there. Now I could go into, I went into a lot more detail on the last, or the second last, or the third last video, explaining about that. But that was the beginning of mankind. That had been, it was, the creation of mankind was first mooted as part of the Creator's desire or wishes for the superior being to be created. You are the superior being. You are the result of all of that. So, there you are, folks. I think I'll finish on that note, and hopefully I'll see you again very soon. Take care.